In a world punctuated with global unrest several decades later following his death, the world continues to quote one man who, no matter what he was faced with, continued to promote peace and nonviolence. We're talking about Mahatma Gandhi. Today marks the Indian independence leader's 145th birthday. Many wonder what this man would say as world conflict seems to continue to drive us further from peace. Earlier, I was joined by the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, Arun Gandhi, an accomplished journalist and activist himself. I first asked him how he feels about a shifting U.S. policy regarding civilian casualties following U.S. airstrikes on ISIS in Syria and Iraq.
Well, I don't like the whole act of violence itself. I mean, wars and killings are outdated, and we need to come into the modern times and adopt better ways, civilized ways of dealing with conflicts. It's not just resolving conflicts that we need to be concerned about, but how do we avoid conflicts, which is the part of the philosophy of nonviolence that people have not really understood. They just think that nonviolence is a strategy, a weapon to be used when convenient and discarded when not. It's not a weapon. It's a way of life. It's a way of making it part of your attitude and your behavior and your relationships. And it's only when we have that kind of a relationship around the world where we break down all these barriers and create more understanding and respect for each other wherever we may live, in the understanding that this whole earth belongs to all of us. It does not belong to any one nation or any one set of people. It belongs to all of us, and it is for us to preserve this intact so that future generations can enjoy the life there. So this whole idea of killing and bombing and solving problems through violence is totally reprehensible.
But now, how would you respond? How should the U.S. respond to groups like ISIS who have used extreme violence like beheading to communicate their message? Or does violence just keep begetting violence?
Yeah, well, that's the whole trouble. You see, we have become very good crisis managers. We have not become good conflict managers. We ignore situations until they become a crisis, and then we try to find a solution to that crisis, and at that point it's very difficult to find a solution. If we had taken note of what was going on in that part of the world and tried peacefully to resolve those issues, we wouldn't be in this kind of a situation, and they wouldn't be so violent in their activities.
So you feel that maybe that this ISIS problem could have been circumvented if the U.S.-led coalitions prior to that were more proactive in their efforts to combat?
Indeed, there is this whole question about, I don't understand why we ever went and attacked Iraq in the first place. And then after attacking Iraq, how do we leave all these people, the whole army that was trained by Saddam Hussein, just leave them and ignore them and walk away from there? And so now, one thing leads to another, and we have got caught in a situation that we can't seem to get out of.
Now, on the subject of wars, your grandfather famously wrote a letter to Adolf Hitler in 1939, just months before the beginning of World War II, a letter that was ultimately never delivered. And I want to read this out. He said, "It is quite clear that you are today the one person in the world who can prevent a war which may reduce humanity to the savage state. Must you pay the price for an object, however worthy it may appear to you to be? Will you listen to the appeal of one who has deliberately shunned the method of war, not without considerable success?" Now, a month later, the world saw the Nazis invade Poland. So in your opinion, Arun, who is likely to start World War III?
Well, we are already on the brink of World War III. I don't think there's need to start it. It has started already, and it's just going to escalate.
Who do you think is responsible for that?
I think everybody is responsible for it, all of humanity, and especially the more powerful nations who could have done something to resolve the situation in the less powerful or the weaker nations and the economically weaker people, we didn't do what we needed to do. We even still today, we don't do it. Africa has been exploited for such a long time, and we still continue to exploit the resources of Africa, but we refuse to do anything to help them economically get a better standard of living there. So it's that kind of exploitation and that kind of colonialism, economic colonialism and political colonialism, that is responsible for all of these acts of violence.
Now, I'd like to move over to the Israel-Gaza conflict. In the early years that Israel was first established as a Jewish state, your grandfather advocated for the Jews, as back then he saw them as the ones being persecuted and oppressed. Today, all summer long, we've seen the atrocities committed by both Israel and Palestine against one another. But do you think these two sides will ever find a path to peace?
As long as they try to find peace through violence, they'll never find it. No nation in the world is ever going to find peace through violence. And if you get peace through violence, it's the peace of the graveyard. We don't want the peace of the graveyard. We want peace where everybody can rejoice and live together without fear. And that kind of peace doesn't come through violence. It can come only through understanding, love, respect, and acceptance of each other as human beings.
All right, Arun, thank you so much for your time and your insight. That was Arun Gandhi, activist and grandson of Mahatma Gandhi.